Okay, this is the South Florida Poetry Journal's first video interviews here at the the Miami Book Fair 2016, and Kim has graciously accepted to talk with us about her new book, Mortal Trash. So Kim, if you would, tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Well, my previous book came out, I think, in around 2009. So it's 7 years of writing, along with having other projects in between, and then sort of seeing what I did in those 7 years that looked worthwhile enough to start to put together. So that's sort of the time frame it was, and it's pretty diverse. Actually, there are some. I was trying to sort of stretch and make things strange in a way that maybe I hadn't before, or was starting to do with my last book, Lucifer at the Starlight. So I just got more into exploring kind of ways to engineer surprise in poems, and then it's also really involved with canonical poetry. There's a section called Over the Bright and Darkened Lands, which is taken from a poem, and every poem in there is sort of a spin in some way on another poem and uses at least one line from it. Usually there's excuse me, there's one called Except Thou Ravish Me, which is from John Donne's Batter My Heart, Three-Person God, and my poem sort of reimagines that as a woman talking to a guy who's battering her. So those are the kinds of things I did, sort of invaded some well-known poems. And then there's another section called the Sonnets, where I took the drama of Shakespeare's sonnets and kind of flipped the characters. So, in his sonnets, there's the whole drama of he's talking to a young man, trying to tell him to, talking about time and age and saying, you better get married now and have children. And then towards the end of the book, there's a sort of love triangle with the dark lady for the last however many sonnets, like 10 or 17, something like that. Yeah. So what I did was sort of flip the script, and I have a series of 14 sonnets, and the first 8 are a woman addressing a young woman, and the next 6 are the dark gentleman, who's sort of a blues guitar player.
It's different perspectives.
Excuse me. I think I'm going to have to find some water.
Sure. But you read this morning, and it was just stunning. You were very well received, and it was really wonderful to hear you read the poems. So what I was going to ask you to do is if you could read one of the poems from Mortal Trash. My request is that first poem that you read today, but if you have something else you would rather read, I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'd be happy to read that.
Okay, because I just found that really, really interesting, the whole concept of that, which, by the way, the other one, the Raining Cats and Dogs, and that whole business of how that, in different languages, how they're sort of
the idioms for rain.
Idioms, yeah. But let's, if you would, read the first poem you read today at this morning's reading.
I'd be happy to. It has a strange title, Pareidolia, which means the perception of pattern and meaning from natural randomness. The skillet burns that appeared on the tortilla rolled by Maria Rubio in 1977 look just like the face of Jesus. In the bathroom this morning, a few strands of my hair formed a wavery peace symbol. What would you pay to see this miracle? What about snowflakes? The clouds they fall from this afternoon resemble another cloud, which resembles a tennis ball served by my dead mother in 1947. Surely that proves that all life on Earth is in a big intergalactic bath towel woven. Somewhere a snowflake pukes on its shoes in a convenience store parking lot. At Jiggles, a half-naked snowflake pole dances in panties on the bar. Across the world, another little snowflake blows itself up in a crowded cafe. Snow everywhere descending. It gathers to a whiteness. Why don't we lie down together, wing bones touching? You look like someone I used to love, only colder.
That is fabulous. Could you Tell us a little bit about the title of the poem was
Pareidolia?
Yeah, is that a word you researched, or what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, I don't know where I came across it, but I'm always,
Yeah.
learning new words.
Sure.
And really, it's reading a McCormick McCarthy
Okay.
book. You're
Right,
just
right.
like, wait, what is that? What is
Yeah.
that? Half of them aren't even words, as
Sure,
it turns out.
sure.
They're either very archaic or they
Right.
don't exist and he made them up. But
Yeah.
I'm sort of fascinated by that,
I am too.
Yeah.
Do you write books or do you write poems?
Well, it's sort of both.
Okay.
I start out, in the case of poetry, I start out writing poems, and then at some point, when I reach kind of critical mass and I feel like I
Yeah.
have a few interesting things
Right.
that are starting to coalesce,
Right.
I generally then think of it as a book,
As a collection. Yeah.
which doesn't necessarily mean I'm writing linear chapters, but
Right.
I'm starting to recognize what the themes are and
Sure.
which generally are my same themes
Right.
as I used to have
Right.
because it's all obsession.
Yeah.
And then, but I will think about that, and
Yeah.
it'll be sort of part of the project at that point, rather than just I think I'll try to see if I can write a poem today.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that goes back to what you said earlier about, I think it was the sonnets about, or was it the other section where one line appears in the next poem, which another line appears in the other poem. and
That's in the sonnets where
Yeah.
there are some lines that are in several poems,
Yeah.
and I sort of stole that from Ted Berrigan.
Okay.
His sonnets, it's very much sort of Shakespeare, Ted Berrigan,
Cool.
John Berryman,
Yeah.
and me. Just
That's-
experimenting with that sort of
Yeah.
what that led me to.
Right.
And rereading the Shakespeare poems a lot, and I remember especially one or two of them where I just kept reading the Shakespeare and trying to figure out, well, how can I make it contemporary and make it this idea, like
Yeah.
what's he saying here, and how can I kind of,
Yeah.
as well as maybe get a line of Shakespeare in there somewhere or a piece of Shakespeare,
Yeah.
and then maybe pull something as well, pull a thread from another poem, which Berrigan does a lot in his.
Such a fascinating thing to do, because it just opens up a whole new, it's not just a poem about this or that, because it's just got these overtones and this underlying, whether it's a line from someplace else or whatever, but it's got this ability to go into a whole new, just open up into another landscape and another time,
Right, and that's what I love, and that's what I've been trying to do more is not so much the narrative where you just tell a story and it sort of happens in one locale and
Right.
then you make some point about the story, or there's nothing wrong with that kind of poem, but I got tired of writing that kind of poem and I wanted to do something different, and I was looking for ways where I could pull in lots of aspects of the world into one poem and have it still hang together in some way.
I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you too, you've collaborated with Dorian Locks, and I was wondering how that came about. And what was the process? Did you guys sort of meet somewhere and decided to do this and then emailed, riffs back and forth that you compiled together to put poems together, or how did that work?
Well, we at the time were good friends and living close to each other, so we actually wrote the book together. It came out of us teaching together. We would do these one-day intensives on various subjects. We did one on the dark side. I remember the shadow self, or on imagery, or on place, or on nature. And I said, wouldn't it be interesting to take our Xeroxes and put them all together and have a book? So we could we've already been teaching these, let's put them into a book and make a book. That'll be easy. So that turned into quite a long project, but we did do it in person. We
Right.
spent a lot of time in each other's houses. We got a residency for a month and had a studio
Nice.
to work together with our,
Sure.
two computers in the same room, sort of putting together essays and poems and stuff. So it was a really collaboration.
She's going to be coming down in January at the Palm Beach Poetry Festival
right,
coming up.
yeah.
So I'm hoping to. She has a poem in the journal in November, or a couple of them, I think. But anyway, I'm hoping to hook up with him and see her. I've seen her read before. She's also wonderful. But let me ask you a fun question. If you were a 19th century poet, who would you be?
Well, it's always sort of the choice between Whitman and Dickinson if you're talking American
I
poets.
felt that might be going.
You know,
yeah, right. The two pillars of.
Right. So I mean,
Are you Whitman, or are you a little both? Or?
It's hard to say. Whitman was a big influence on me early on. I really loved his inclusiveness. I loved the fact that he was thinking about me before he knew I existed. Some people think that's really, I don't know, they have a problem with that.
Yeah.
Like it's hubris or something.
Yeah,
And I thought
yeah.
it was terrific. I mean, I think that, Leaves of Grass is his Bible, and it's his spirituality that really attracted me, and also all his lists and catalogs and the way he talked about America.
Sure.
So he was kind of an influence,
Yeah.
I think. And Dickinson later, I don't think she was so much of an influence, but I was more immediately drawn to Whitman, and then later got into Dickinson and really saw how amazing
Yeah.
her depth was. So really
All
sort
these
of the
years
polar
later, yes.
opposites, but yeah.
Yeah, and all, like a century later or more, we're still talking those
Yeah.
two poets, right?
Right,
In the
yeah.
21st century, which is
Yeah.
amazing. You've got CDs, music.
I do.
Is it a do you use your poetry in that, or is it just music in and of itself? Or?
Well, I have 2 word music CDs, one with another poet, Susan Brown, that's called Swearing, Smoking, Drinking, and Kissing, and that's both of our poems with music. And then the new one is called My Black Angel, and it comes out of another project I did called My Black Angel Blues Poems and Portraits, which is a sort of coffee table book with woodcuts of early blues musicians. So it was a collaboration with a woodcut artist, and then we made a CD, and because he played the banjo and was into the early blues as I was. So he's on it. There are 2 or 3 different guitarists on it. And I play harmonica on a few cuts, and so it was this whole collaborative project too. So it's very much word music.
Cool. I used to play blues harp myself.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Yeah.
back many years ago. I wouldn't do it now, but I was very much into the blues. Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee, Muddy Waters, all those guys. I really love them. Do you think American poets need to be more political in what they're putting out? We often think about the Eastern European poets who had written at a time, of course, during war and occupation and all those things that were going on. And you don't really see as much of that, and haven't, in the United States and in America. What do you feel about that sort of thing?
I don't know. It's hard. I mean, it's hard for me to think about poetry globally in terms of what the situation is in poetry, because I just have a little window on it. It doesn't seem to me that there's a lack of political poetry in America. I mean, certainly, this is really
We
bugging
should
me.
say that there's a gnat floating around
bug
here.
that's driving me
he's
crazy.
been coming at me as well. Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, if you look at, all the African American poets are certainly writing about race relations
Sure.
in this country and
Right,
what's going on. And then there's Martina Spada and Daisy Zamora, and there are any number of people who are writing political things. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that I don't think it's necessarily the poet's responsibility to write political poetry. I think you've got plenty of great spiritual poets and poets looking at other aspects of life.
Yeah.
You can say that everything is political in a sense as well.
Right.
But I tend to think of it more that we all need to be political as citizens, and do something,
Right.
and not excuse ourselves from the political realm. And whether we do that with our work or not is a different story to me. I don't feel a poet is obliged to address contemporary political events, because I think that can be a real narrowing in some ways. And it's just looking at it through one lens, and what's political anyway. Ever since the feminist wave of the 70s, it said the personal is political. And even trees, when Brecht said something about, what are we to do when a poem about trees is, I can't remember the rest of it, but he was basically saying, so what? Well, a poem about trees now is very political, because we've realized what we're doing in the environment. So if you're just writing lovely lyrical paeans to nature, that's a political thing, because it's saying this is important, and who knows how that's going to go into the world and affect somebody and affect their love of nature, or turn them on to something in the natural world that they're then going to want to protect that's endangered. So I think poetry goes out in myriad ways in the world that we don't even understand.
great observation. Our time is up. I know you have other interviews to do. I thank you so much for this.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Hopefully we'll see you again another time. Thank
All
you,
right.
Kim.
Thanks.